I first started building the shop around Labor Day of 2006. The shop is 20 foot by 20 foot, and that's 400 square feet. There's a 6 foot by 10 foot knockout for outside covered storage. This reduces the inside square footage to 340 square feet. There is attic storage with flooring. The shop also has a 100 amp service that is fed from my house. Currently there are 5 lighting fixtures in the shop. These are 8 foot HO fluorescents. It has a 5 kVA heater that I run during the winter, and I have an AC unit that comes in very handy during these hot and humid southern summers. And at one point I had a problem with mildew since my shop is in the woods, and we purchased a Whirlpool dehumidifier, and that has helped tremendously to mitigate any kind of mildew. Okay, well, let's start with the table saw, because I believe, as I've said in the past, that the table saw is the centerpiece of any woodworking shop. This is a mid-80s Sears Craftsman 10-inch. It is the 1.5 horse version that is belt driven. And along with a good table saw, you need jigs to go along with that, a crosscut sled, a panel sled. I have a smaller crosscut sled, if you will, that just pushes pieces through the blade at a 90 degrees, and we don't go all the way through with that. It just stops part of the way. We have stop locks, push sticks, and there are other specific jigs that you can make. This one is a piece of scrap with a runner, and I usually just screw something to it when I'm making some crazy angles or something like that. You search on YouTube, there are jigs for all kinds of things that you can build for your table saw. Well, these are some of the jigs that I have built for my table saw, especially the crosscut sled. You see that a lot in my videos, and it is very versatile. This particular one is a larger version so that I can make door faces and drawer faces when we get into our kitchen remodel later on this year. I do want to build a smaller version of this, something that I can use every day. It's smaller, lighter, and have a little bit more features built into it. And when not in use, I have specific locations for the rip fence, the miter gauge, the crosscut sled, and the panel sled. These are out of the way and are real easy to get to. And you might notice the custom table saw stand. I have a series of videos, and you can find those right here in this playlist. Okay, so let's move on to the miter station, and specifically the miter saw. This is a Delta 10-inch, and if you were doing construction work, this would be very good to use for that. However, I do not use this to make crosscuts that need to be accurate. I use my crosscut sled and my table saw for that. Eventually, I'd like to get the Bosch version that has the funky arm on the back. It takes up less space, and it has quite a bit of capacity on a crosscut. Alright, so while we're talking about the miter saw, we might as well talk about the miter saw station. This consists of 2 banks of drawers. Those 2 sections there are 1 bank, and this section here is 1 bank. They cannot be separated. That was the first one that I built, and I royally screwed that up, so we're going to actually look at this one up close. Alright, this is a Jeremy Schmidt inspired design. It has a lot of similarities to his, and if you go to his YouTube channel, there are a couple of videos on him constructing his version of this. What is really cool about it is you can take any of these drawers and move them to where you want them. In other words, there's a 6-inch drawer here. Right next to it are a 2-inch, a 2-inch, and a 4-inch. And you can see that it's a 2-inch difference between this set here. These consist of a 2-inch, a 4-inch, a 6, an 8, and a 10. And like I said, you can pull these out and rearrange them however. So I'll pull some of these out and show you how we can rearrange them, and show you the actual carcass and how it's designed and how it allows us to do that. Okay, I hope there's enough light in here inside the cabinet that you can see this. But these dados are cut every 2 inches. And the drawers are based off of 2-inch increments. So you have a 2, a 4, a 6, etc. And you can rearrange these, like I said, in any configuration based on that. So you could have this entire bank all 2-inch. You could have all 4-inch, 6-inch, 8, or 10, however you would like. But of course, you're going to be limited to how many of those types or those size drawers that you have in this bank. So I've taken some drawers out. Let me throw those back in a different arrangement. So we can put this one in the top. It matches this one. Let's throw this one here. Let's put this one right above it. This is my battery drill accessories. That will go in there. And there are all the drill bits. Now when you do pull these out, they do have a tendency to lean down in the front, and you can pull it all the way out, and I have done that. So you will have a big mess, especially if it's the drill bit drawer, if you do that. So these are not how this is arranged. You probably saw earlier how they were in here. So that's kind of how this system works. One of the problems that I see with this is the sides tend to push out. So I think the next ones that I build, I'm going to put a shelf in the middle that will just actually hold everything nice and tight and square. And I'm going to eliminate, or that will eliminate a little bit of space that you have, but you know, it's a small price to pay to have something that's a little more sturdy and hopefully won't fall apart in the future. And I'd like to also mention that this is 42 inches high, so these are really custom to my situation that I wanted here in the shop. When I'm standing and working, I really like to have things a little bit higher than waist level, and so it's 41 and a half, 42 inches tall. All right, some of the other equipment I have out underneath the 6x10 covered storage, I have a 60-gallon Cobalt air compressor that is out there. I actually painted a car in this shop back in 2007, I believe. It was a Volkswagen, a 66 VW Beetle, and I painted that in the shop. You can see the orange color overspray on some of the walls. But I have a large 60-gallon air compressor out there. This is the Bostik little pancake air compressor. I use this one most of the time. There are air nailers that came with this kit, and I'll show you those in a little bit. But I also have a Lincoln welder. I do some welding from time to time. This is actually my brother-in-law's, and he never really uses it, so I bought a tank for it. So we use argon gas, and it's a MIG. So this is small. It's really good for sheet metal on automotive applications and things like that, and that's what I use it for. You can change the wire out to go from a 025 to a 035 or a 040 and weld some pretty thick stuff. Maybe 3/8 of an inch would probably be the thickest that I would want to weld with this, but it's a very good welder for its size and what all it does. And of course I have some welding gloves and a welding helmet, a couple of welding helmets to use when I pull out the welder. Alright, so let's get into some of the power tools that I own. This is a DeWalt DWE 575SB 7 1/4 inch circular saw. This has the aluminum base on it, and you see me use this quite a bit in breaking down sheet goods and things like that. I do use this on my home projects for just cutting 2x6s, 2x4s when I'm up at the house and working up there. All right, this is the DeWalt DW618 fixed base router and plunge base router kit that you buy. This is a 2 1/4 horsepower, and it 2 1/4 horsepower router that accepts 1/4 inch shaft drill bit, or 1/4 inch shaft router bits, and it also has a 1/2 inch collar. So this is a great router. It has lots of power. It's adjustable speed on it. It has the soft start technology, so it just doesn't come on and almost jump out of your hands. It kind of ramps up to speed, and that's a good safety feature to have on something as powerful as a router. These things are dangerous, especially when they're in a table application. The plunge base that you see here, I have it mounted to a circle jig, and I have the pin part here. This is adjustable, of course, and you can get probably, I don't know, maybe about a 3-inch circle out of this. So that'd be the minimum that you could do, and the maximum would be way over here. So that would probably be, I don't know, about 30 inches or so. So kind of a nice little jig to have ready to adapt to either your plunge base router or your fixed base. It doesn't have to necessarily be on the plunge router. This makes it easier when you're cutting circles, because I don't like to take such a big deep cut, and it's just easier to loosen the set knob, lower it a little bit, and continue your cut. So that's the router. And I only have one router. Well, continuing on with the yellow and black theme, this is actually a DeWalt drill driver combo that came with 2 batteries and a charger, and then a regular drill that was separate with 2 batteries and its own charger. I do like DeWalt. DeWalt's been around a long time. Obviously, companies are sold during the years or over the years, but DeWalt seems to have the good quality equipment out, and there's a lot of different packages that you can buy to get different pieces of power equipment. One of the things I wish that I did have, since I have the batteries, is a battery circular saw. That would be really nice to not have to drag a drop cord around for the regular circular saw. Alright, so more black and yellow tools. This is the DeWalt DWE 6423 sander. It's a random orbit. I believe it's a 5-inch. What I like about this is I have a old pool vacuum hose that's on my Thien baffle, and it fits right inside of here. You see me use that. You have to watch it, it'll fall out, but that really helps cut down a lot of the dust that gets around the shop. It does have a small bag, dust bag with it if you need to use that, but I have the hose, so it works out really well. Well, here are some other power tools that I have. This is a really nice Bosch jigsaw. It's variable speed. I'm not sure what the model number is, but I like it because your hand is a lot lower and you have more control instead of your hand being up really high. I just prefer this style better. This was not cheap. If you look online, they're pretty expensive. The regular jigsaw that's like this, that has a handle on top, is probably about half as much, but this thing is, I think you can cut a tree down with it. It's unbelievable. So then we have a Makita grinder. Obviously I use that when I'm welding, and I guess you could get some of those Arbortech discs to go on, and any of the accessories that Arbortech makes for that. And then we have a multi-tool. This is not used very much. This is a Harbor Freight brand. I needed this when we were replacing the floors in our Airstream, and I needed to be able to cut on top of some of the metal supports that were in there and get the old floor out. These things have 101 different uses, and it's a Harbor Freight. I don't use it very often. It should last quite a while. And last but not least, this is a Milwaukee 1/2-inch drill motor. It's actually a hammer drill / drill motor, and I built this simple drill press kind of a setup here just because I don't have a drill press and I like to drill straight holes, especially when you're using the circle cutting jig. That hole needs to be as plumb as possible, and this is kind of my makeshift drill press. But this is a Milwaukee 1/2-inch drill motor. Just real simple. Slides on a column. It does stick. It's kind of hard to work, but it works. It's variable speed too, and I could actually. This is kind of tight and stays into position, so I can move that to whatever speed that I need for the drill motor to run. So that is definitely a redneck drill press. Build your own today. Alright, so we talked about the redneck drill press. This is not a redneck router table. This is something that one of the first things that I built when I got back into woodworking. This is for that DeWalt 2 1/4 horsepower router. It is made for this. This is an insert. First off, let's do this. I have an adjustable fence that slides on the T-track, and that keeps it parallel, or keeps us, gives us a place to clamp the fence down. It also has a box on the back for dust collection, and this comes in really handy. I think everybody needs a router table. I have different inserts, center inserts, different size holes. For this one fits pretty tight. And the special thing about this router table is this circle cutting insert. Now, this is a tight fit. You saw me use this on the last build. I had made the circle cutting jig for the plunge router base, and that, with it being corded, it really gets tangled up the more times you go in a circle and all that good stuff. So this came to me one afternoon while I was thinking about how I could, what jigs I needed for the router table, and this particular guide here, it has a clamp on the back, a knob and a clamp. There's sandpaper underneath that. When these routers, when these drill bits, you really feed it too fast, you'll get this fine vibration. And I've noticed that sometimes this fine vibration will do one of two things. In a situation like this, it will actually move this pin either in or out, or the router bit will either move up or down. I've noticed that it will slide in the collar. Obviously, if it's all the way down, it won't go down anymore. It usually will come out. So I put sandpaper on the back of this. You can tighten this thing down, but if you feed it too fast and you get that high frequency vibration, it just messes up the settings for some reason. But again, we can getting back to what we're talking about, we can actually turn the the pin apparatus around so we can get really close to the blade, or the bit, excuse me, or we can turn it around and get as far away as possible. So that's probably going to wind up being, that'll probably give you about a 16-inch circle. And the smallest we can do is probably somewhere around maybe 3/4 of an inch, but I'm not going to put my fingers that close to that. I would probably attach a spool board on top of that and put some double-sided tape and then run it around until it goes all the way through. That'd be a good, safe way to do that. I also have another, this has a 10/24 studded knob that goes on here. This actually has a 1/4 20 insert in it, so that it does the same thing. It slides in. This was the first one I made. It's kind of loose. You can flip it back around, get about the same measurements, but it has a 1/4 20 locking nut rather than the 10/24. All right, so the router table does have a lift inside of here. This is a 5/8 inch rod with a rod coupling that it is mounted to this piece here, and then it's captured with 2 nuts on the bottom, so that when you turn the nut on the bottom, this mechanism will go up and down. There's 2 clamp knobs. I don't know if you can see the clamp knobs in there or not, right here, and this is split. But again, that DeWalt router slides right up in here once you remove the fixed base or the plunge base from it. And this thing works perfect. I mean, there are 2 nuts on the bottom of the shaft or the rod here, and I have to use a 15/16 wrench to adjust the height. But that's okay, because sometimes we make an adjustment, run some test pieces, the adjustment looks fine, and we leave it. Usually when I'm using the circle jig, I'll cut one side, flip it over, cut the other side, maybe do about 2 rounds, run it on both sides again until I get to the middle, and then I like to leave a paper thin piece there on the circle jig and then just cut that out, and then clean up where that paper thin piece of wood was left over. But this is the router table. This is has been a great addition to the shop, and as we get deeper into some other projects, you'll probably see more and more of this being used. All right, while we're right here close to it, I wanted to mention, you probably saw the table that I was working on. This is actually my drafting table. A little story behind this. Back when I was younger, I have a cousin of mine who I looked up to and really wanted to be like him. He built models, and he was just a very good person, good loving person, but he had skills that were just mind-boggling to me as a 12, 13-year-old. And he did architectural work. He designed houses and things like that, but he worked for a builder, and he was the superintendent and built large subdivisions. Drafting was just kind of a hobby of his. So I would go over and sit at his big drafting table. So when I turned 13 years of age, my parents bought this drafting table, the T-square, some other squares, and a pencil sharpener, a drafting pencil, templates, you name it. They set me up to be an architect, and I've had this ever since. I've built models on this. I've built model trains on this. I've done homework on this table. I really want to restore it at some point, put a new top on it. This is kind of like a hollow corridor, almost kind of a setup. But I just thought I'd share that with you. Still have it. All right, I'm not going to talk about this too much, but you do see it in the background in the videos. This is a DIY bandsaw. I bought the print, I bought the drawings to build this, and I can't remember the guy's name. He is Hassan Woodworks, I believe. He's from Spain. You'll see a lot of his videos on YouTube. He's actually a luthier, which he repairs musical instruments, guitars, basses, violins, etc. But he designed this. To me, it looks like the Rikon bandsaw, but when finished, this will be a 14-inch bandsaw, and I would like to build a larger version of this, not necessarily throat depth wise, but height wise, and dedicate it specifically for resawing. Put a resaw blade on there and just set it up specifically for that. So when I get back to, and when I have all the parts for this, I need a motor and some bearings and things like that. When I get all those parts, I'm actually going to do a series on finishing this and putting it together. So I really need to start collecting those parts. All right, so one of the best additions, in my opinion, to the shop so far is this outfeed table. I cannot tell you how much easier it is to take a large piece of plywood, especially 3/4 inch plywood, which is very dense and heavy, and slide that across and come onto this table and it be well supported. That drafting table, when it was butted up against to the table saw, it just had a rough surface on it. It was not smooth. It creaked when you lean on it. This table, this outfeed table, has just been a godsend to this shop. It's almost not big enough, believe it or not, but my plan is to add or build an assembly table not too far down the road. Probably going to be the same height on wheels maybe, and it can butt up against here if need be. I'd like for it to be the same height, but it may not be the same height as this. Since I have the bench top router table, if it's on this particular table, it's almost too high. The table that it is actually sitting on is sawhorses and a piece of OSB. So this is the assembly table that I'm partially using at this point, and you can see it's probably 4 inches lower than the outfeed table, and it's about the right height for this for the router table. The router table is this high because of the clearance needed for the router. But again, I cannot tell you, having an outfeed table and having a much larger surface for the table saw is just phenomenal. Once finished, this will have a lot of storage in it. It'll weigh a lot, which is really what you want. It's not light, that's for sure, just empty the way it is. But once I get all the drawers and cabinets and everything loaded up in it to store, it's going to be pretty heavy. And if you would like to see how this was designed and built, there's a playlist right here for you. Whoa. Alright, so some of the things that are in the drawers, this is kind of like my main marking. I have my marking tools in here. I have a square, some calipers, just pencils, eraser, a small tape, but also have my notebooks in here. I have my drafting pencil sharpener from when I was 13. I also have my drafting pencil from when I was 13. And some other things, stitch gauge, engineer rule from when I was 13. So in this drawer we have drill bits. I keep my, believe it or not, these drawers are pretty dust free, and I keep my dust mask in there. I do have a TV. Remote for that is in here. And we have some screws, different hardware. I have some drawer pulls, some cabinet door hinges for the kitchen. And of course we have the Kreg tool drawer. This is the one Kreg tool that I have. I have the clamps. I have the pocket hole clamp. It's in there. Pocket hole screws. And I do have the 2x4 pocket hole jig that I built, and there's a link right here for that video. And then here are some of the power tools, my Bosch jigsaw, the multi-tool, the grinder, and I have a pair of shears in there as well. I didn't show you that earlier. And this is just a junk drawer on the bottom. I have storage in this drawer as well. Some electrical fitting screws, machine screws, things like that. I am going to add one of these really nice start and stop switches to the table saw and to the router. And there are drawer slides in there too. Those things are heavy. I do have a bunch of fittings for cleaning up the shop, as far as wands and brushes, different fittings, some PVC fittings, and more hinges for cabinet doors. And we have a hardware drawer. And we have a hardware drawer. Then I have a drawer for my battery drills. This has a couple hammers in it, some tape measures, my 2 block planes, dado set. And then this has some screwdrivers, a couple chisels, all the fittings for the drill drivers, some Vicks bits, some chamfering bits, things like that. And this is the bit drawer. Paddle bits, Forstner bits, which I have a Forstner set, and then some hole saws and some brad point bits. And one thing I did not talk about, or I'll mention it now, I guess. Anytime you get these silica packs, keep them. I mentioned earlier, or mentioned somewhere in this video, about mildew and moisture in this shop. So I keep these and just throw them in these drawers. Several of these drawers have these packs in here. Believe it or not, most of there's a pack here. You can see the surface rust. This was brand new when I bought it and brought it home. You can see the surface rust just from the moisture in this shop. And I have a dehumidifier, so it's crazy how humid it is here in the South, and how much the temperature swings, and how much the temperature or the humidity swings as well. Alright, so moving on to the next set of cabinets. We have a sandpaper drawer. This is some basic tools as far as nut drivers, some strippers, a few wrenches, channel locks, pliers, things of that nature. Then we get into some paint supplies, rags, old t-shirts, some nice paint brushes, and my wife gives me all these sandwich containers that sandwich meat come in, and these are the lids. Now I don't use these except for maybe to pour a little bit of paint out on it, and then I just don't worry about cleaning them. I throw them away. So I've got this shape and this shape. And what I do with the clear piece that's deeper is I use that in the other drawers just to put screws in and things of that nature. And these are some the inserts for the router table. I have a locating jig for a 35 millimeter Forstner bit for cabinet doors for European concealed hinges. That's what that is. Basically just put it on the corner of the cabinet door and drill your hole. More painting supplies, stir sticks, brushes, my router and sander. This bottom drawer is kind of a catch-all kind of a thing. I have siding nails, some extra air gun parts. This is where all of my jigs go in as far as for the router table. They're actually up here. I'll show you those in a second. This is a junk drawer for the Airstream. These are the old cabinet hinges, some parts and pieces I've pulled off, some extra parts, some plumbing washers and faucet kit, things of that nature. Have not talked about this yet, but I do have a set of pneumatic nailers. I have a Hitachi siding fence nailer. It shoots a 2.5 inch by 0.09 nail with a head on it. I use that to shoot through masonite or hardy plank. Then I also use, this is a 18 gauge nailer. This is a 16 gauge nailer. And of course a pin nailer. So these are the Bostik and this is the Porter cable. Next drawer up, this should be our pneumatic nails, some staples, stapler. Pretty much a junk drawer. Has some jigsaw blades in it and some manuals. Razor blade drawer, and these are pulls for drawers and cabinet doors in our kitchen. And another junk drawer. Hacksaw, speed square, small pry bar, plexiglass cutter, and this is for caulking. Never use it. Alright, so some of the jigs that we haven't talked about, I have these kind of I don't even know what you'd call them. These are basically for just squares. It's square this way, it's square this way, it's square this way, and this piece is just to clamp it to the table so that you can glue. I used it when I was building the outfeed table. That's when I came up with this little jig. And again, this is square this way and square this way, so if we need to line things up or hold them in a certain formation or something like that, that's what this is for. Again, here's another 90. If we want to hold things to a perfect 90, we can clamp on this side. We can put it inside of a box and clamp it. It'll hold it at a 90 degrees. This jig is for cutting mortise and tenon. That's not mortise and tenons, but for a shaker style door, cabinet door, this will cut the groove. This will not cut the groove. This will cut the tongue portion. For that, you would actually clamp it straight up and down, and this is for the router, and it slides up against the router fence, and you basically set the blade up to where it just barely runs across this surface. And I use a 1/4 inch straight cut bit for that. This is the same as this last jig, except this goes on the table saw. This clamps on the fence. You clamp your piece this way vertically here, and you use the saw blade to actually cut the tongue on the table saw. All right, and one of the other things that I have built is the Thien baffle. And this last video I put out, we added the pipe that goes from the shop vac over to the theme baffle. And one thing I did not mention in that video was how I got this last 45 to connect to the shop vac. And I took this up to my grill. I have a burner, a side burner, to keep a pot hot or something like that. And I simply just warmed this piece of PVC up, brought it back down here and fit it on here, making sure it didn't glue itself to the shop vac. But this is just a, none of these pieces are glued together. They're just fit together very tightly. I had mentioned something earlier about attaching this hose to my sander. This is a pool vacuum hose. So when you vacuum your pool out, somehow or another it got a hole in it, and it just happened to fit and work for my shop dust collection here. I connect this to the router table. I connect this to the sander, and I also have built a wand that I vacuum the floor with, and it's made out of 1-inch PVC, and it has a store-bought adapter on the end that is like an 8-inch, 10-inch wide wand. You also saw the drawer with the different wands in it, the straight wand to get into the corners underneath the table saw and things of that nature. But this is a rigid 2-horse wet dry shop vac, and I had mentioned in that last video, you couldn't see it, the exhaust is right here. I don't understand why they did that, because it blows straight down on both sides and it just blows the dust. That is just asinine. However, this is 20 years old. I bought this in 2000, and I mean, it's lasted. That's all I can say. It's got about the 5th or 6th filter in it, but it does work. But that's stupid that it blows the air out onto the floor. You're trying to pick up dust and it just blows the dust away. Doesn't make any sense. So that's my shop vac and baffle, aka dust collection. And in terms of shop air quality, this is just a box fan that you would buy, and it's in a 1/2-inch plywood box that holds a regular AC filter. I clean this thing out at least twice a week. Usually when I'm down here working, I will plug this in and let it run. You may hear it running in some of the videos. I forget to cut it off from time to time, but it pulls air in here and blows out the other side, and I leave it running when I'm not in the shop most of the time, and I'll come down here and this filter will be totally clogged up. So it does work. It's real simple. Probably got $30 into this fan, filter, and the wood to actually build it. And last but not least is my tripod. This is one of the first things that I built when I started Made by Hand Shop YouTube channel. I do record with my phone. This is made of maple, and without this tripod and camera mount, phone mount, video for me would probably just be frustrating. The cool thing about this is that it folds up. It's made from maple, and I think when it's fully extended, it's probably right at 6 feet tall. All right, so this is it, the tripod fully extended, and it's probably only about 5 feet tall where the phone mount is located. So that is what is holding the camera. I say camera, phone. That is what is holding the recording device while I'm making my videos. Well, I hope you enjoyed a glimpse into my shop, and this is in no means a boasting of what I have. hopefully you have the same tools that I have, and you can easily build some of the stuff that I have built thus far. Not everyone probably has this large of a table saw, but these new contractor saws that are compact are pretty powerful, and they have a lot of cool things built into them because they were meant for portability and moving from job site to job site. So I would ask you that you would consider subscribing. I really want to build my subscriber base. So I ask you please to seriously consider subscribing. It's just merely clicking the subscribe button, and then you can click the bell and it will let you know when I have uploaded a video. So I really appreciate you watching. It is greatly appreciated. We are a small channel. If you think that any of our videos are worthy of a thumbs up, please give us that. It really helps us out here on YouTube in being noticed, and therefore that equates into subscribers, and that of course is growth. So as always, be all you can be, but best of all, be sharp. Stay safe in your shop, everyone.